podcast. Here are your hosts, Sean Phillips, Andy Van Beber, and Travis Kirkendall.
And ladies, ladies and gentlemen, don't adjust your televisions, don't adjust your phone screens. This is Live Voice of Reason podcast. My name is Andrew Van Beber, as we will be joined shortly, as you see below here. Sean Phillips is here. He's putting a child down for bed, and he's not having a good time, but, you know, and then the other handsome gentleman to my left there is El Presidente, as I call him, but the Pike County Prosecuting Attorney, Alex Ellison. Alex,
Hello.
It is good to have you this evening at the to join us for episode number 50. We are nearing. We are so far behind schedule to get to end our third season, but we are nearing that time. How are things going over in the Pike County Prosecuting Attorney's office?
They're good. They're busy. We've been trying a lot of cases, but that's always a good thing. But yeah, things are good. Just doing my part to try and keep Pike County safe.
Yeah, well, I believe last time you joined us was last summer, and we had your whole thing of the ice cream scenario of how when the temperatures go up, crime rates go up, and so we can always make that.
Yeah,
connection.
We'll see how this summer goes. We'll see.
Yeah, and do you? So I was talking to a friend of mine today. She said she's on the grand jury. I guess you guys. So do you guys do regular juries and grand juries, or how does that work in Pike? How's that work in Missouri? I've always wondered how that works in Missouri.
Yeah. So we have a regular jury, which is the actual technical term is a petit jury.
Right.
That's the jury of 12 people that hear a criminal trial. And they serve for one case and one case only. A grand jury is a group of citizens that is impaneled. There's usually a group of 15 citizens, and they serve for 6 months at a time. Ooh. And basically, I take most of my high-level, usually violent and sex crimes, felonies, to the grand jury and present them to the grand jury. They're not deciding guilt or innocence.
Just if you got the evidence to go to trial.
Yep.
So that is. I've always wondered how that works in Missouri. I know that some states don't use the grand jury, but I know that I was aware that Missouri was, and I didn't know quite if we used it in Pike County or not. I know some counties don't use it, but that's good. So, but everything else is going fine. I am on my second week of freedom from Clopton schools, but we've been enjoying the summer, swimming and all that other good stuff. But Sean will be joining us here shortly. But let's dive right into it tonight. We always have you on when we have great questions that deal with the law. And as we saw this week, or this last week, Donald Trump was convicted on, I believe it was 34 charges. And basically falsifying records. I can't remember them all now, but I'm bringing it up right now. But first of all, was this something that? I'll just get this out of the way first, because what a lot of people have been saying is this is really fast. All of these trials are happening so fast. He was indicted late in the year last year, and now we're coming to the first. This was the first of his trials. He has been indicted. I think it was 95 different charges in different states and everything, and this was the first trial of all those to go to trial. Is this happening too fast? In your opinion, are these happening very fast? Is this the time frame that these usually happen in, or is it sped up, or is it slowed down? Is it compared to normal? What is this?
Yeah, I mean, of course, I've never prosecuted a former president, so it's a little bit of a unique situation. But it's actually not completely out of the normal. Criminal cases, felonies. Sometimes it just depends on circumstances. I've had some cases where like 2 summers ago, I tried a murder case, and it had occurred 4.5 years earlier. But then at the same time, I've got a case set for trial in 2 weeks, a drug case that happened in January, and we're trying it in early June. So um, it's a while. So I would say the year to year and a half that these things have all been pending, it's not out of the ordinary quick. I know the ones that are getting delayed right now, those are they're gonna be starting to push the boundary as far as maybe being slower than normal, but definitely not too quick.
And so I brought up all these counts just to see. I mean, what this is the charges. Basically, the checks written by Michael Cohen to Stormy Daniels. The check, and then they call them checking allegedly falsified documents, voucher entry and ledgers, checks and stubs entries that have been falsified. Um, is this and so what's the maximum? What do you think will be the maximum amount that this could probably carry?
So I looked at it. They're e felonies in New York, which actually are analogous to e felonies in Missouri, and they carry a maximum of 4 years in
Per
prison or a
charge.
5,000. Yes, 4 years per charge or a $5,000 fine per charge. So the judge could potentially get. I mean, I'm not good enough at math. At whatever 34 times 5 is,
Yeah,
he could, or 34 times 4, he could give him that. But I doubt it. I think more
136 years.
realistically, probably a high end would be 1 4-year sentence, and then the low end could be a fine or maybe some form of probation. And with probation, you can give all sorts of stuff in the middle. You could get some jail time, you could get community service, you could get house arrest, all sorts of things.
So do you think that this is so? I guess another thing that I want to look at and I want to is if they actually do put him in prison,
Yeah.
and since this is the and Sean, welcome there, Sean. Um, I if he does go to prison, he cannot pardon himself because it's a state crime, correct?
Correct. The president has no power over state charges.
So and so, what do you think? What do you think is dry? I mean, is there? So you said earlier that this. I mean, this is not totally out of the ordinary, but as far as the magnitude of this case, do you think this is rushed?
Maybe. I mean, it's possible, but I can see the motivation. I think the motivation is to rush it is pretty clear, at least from the prosecution. They wanted to do it before the election. And the defense, I'm sure, wanted to drag it out until after the election. But like I said, this really isn't out of the ordinary. For about a year to 18 months, that's a pretty normal time frame to have a felony trial.
And what is the other thing that I wanted to ask, and then Sean will probably jump in with some things, I'm sure. Is this so? I was watching. I can't remember one of the news magazine programs where they were interviewing. Um, it was one of the senators who's in his in one of Trump's lists of possible vice presidential candidates, and basically what he said was that they're trying him on just petty accounting uh, errors. Is this? I mean, have you looked at these charges in detail, or have you? What kind of things are we looking at here?
Yeah, I mean, it's not a crime that I'm super familiar with, but I understood the charges, and so basically he's charged with falsifying business records, and that's based on these payments that went from Michael Cohen to Stormy Daniels and then Trump reimbursed Michael Cohen for those. In his business records, he classified the reimbursement payments as legal fees, when in reality, the district attorney was able to prove they weren't legal fees; they were reimbursements for, hush money. And paying someone hush money isn't illegal, but the fact that they classified them as legal fees then makes it a false business record, and then it becomes a felony when the falsification of that business record is linked to cover some aspect of covering up another crime. And in their case, the district attorney argued that he was covering up one of three possible crimes, two being election offenses and one being a potential tax crime. And so it's not an overly complicated charge, really.
So it's not something that takes a lot of. Once they establish that as, they have the records, and so they were basically. I'm sure they went through a discovery phase where Trump had to produce those documents and everything, and then.
Yeah. Well, actually, so in a criminal case, the defendant is not required to produce anything themselves. They would have
really okay.
The state would have gotten those on their own, either through they would have gotten them through some sort of search warrant for his business records, or they could have served an investigative subpoena for their search warrant.
So they did. Is that what they did then? Is that?
They were able to get those affidavits or those business records through, like, law enforcement would have gone out and gotten those records for the prosecution. So Trump didn't necessarily have to provide them, but it's really not a complicated charge. I didn't think.
Mm-hmm. Sean, I'll let you jump in. It's good to see you, buddy. By the way.
Yeah, sorry about that. My
no, it's no problem.
My newborn she's going through it today, so took a little bit longer to get out here than I was hoping it would. Yeah, so one of the things, and I don't want to.
Oh, we lost your voice, Sean. We lost your audio.
I somehow keep automatically muting myself. I'm not sure how or why. Okay, so one of the things that I didn't understand was I saw a thing that had mentioned, like, let's see here. Okay, so I'm reading this here. This is New York Times. And so it was along the lines of the judge overseeing the trial of Donald J. Trump has said that jurors could individually choose from a menu of different crimes to find the former president guilty, so long as the total of votes added up to 12. So Judge Merchant just told the jury that they do not need unanimity. Oh gosh, that's a big word. To convict. Mr. Roberts wrote, 4 could agree on one crime, 4 could on a different one, and 4 on another. He said he would treat 4-4-4 as a unanimous verdict. Now, is that something that you're familiar with? Have you ever seen in any cases that you've worked, or is this just kind of like something that does exist that was kind of taken out of context by individuals to kind of say, oh, it's, this is another sham that we're kind of looking at?
I would say it's a little bit of both. It's not something I've ever dealt with on a particular charge that I've had, but definitely the news coverage I've seen has taken it out of context. The jurors still had to reach a unanimous verdict as to whether he'd actually committed these crimes.
Mm-hmm.
But I read the order from the judge, and what the judge said was that they didn't have to necessarily agree on what the underlying crime that the falsification was covering up was. All they had to decide unanimously was that he did falsify the business records, and that the records were falsified to cover up some other crime. What that other crime was, they did not have to have unanimity on.
Gotcha. Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah.
So when we look at these other cases, I finally found the list of what I was looking for here. So we still have the second indictment on classified documents. We still have the other indictment on the what was going on in the election as far as his attempt to try to undermine the election. Then the RICO case the Georgia RICO case kind of has me, you know. First of all, explain to us what a RICO case is.
I mean, it's not something I necessarily deal with because RICO is a federal statute. It's the racketeering statute, but I know a little bit about it, and it's basically it was intended. In fact, Rudy Giuliani made it famous in the '90s. He used it to attack the mob, and yeah, I know. And basically, it's the RICO statute is used to prosecute gang activity or mob activities, things that may not on their face be illegal necessarily or criminal, but when you tie them to some other sort of conspiracy, they may become illegal. And so that's what that Georgia case is about. And that case is that case I think is going to be much harder to prove than any of the others.
Yeah, because it was saying conspiracy to commit impersonating a public officer, conspiracy to commit forgery, conspiracy to commit false statements and writings. Yeah, that was, and then the Arizona fake electors case was another one. Let's see.
Yeah.
So those are the big ones. All together. So were you surprised about the 30 that he was convicted on all 34 charges in New York first?
I actually wasn't surprised. I followed the trial pretty closely. I would listen occasionally to some of the testimony, and I read a lot of articles about it throughout the trial. And it seemed to me like they had, like I said, it's actually a pretty simple charge, and it seemed like they had made their case. And so I was not really surprised that he was found guilty in New York.
Well, and the thing that, and Sean's going to say it has something else for you here in a second, but I watched a video, and if I can find him, and I want us to watch it, but a video I watched of, he's a Fox Sports commentator, has his own show, podcast. I can't think of it right now, but I was watching him this week. And
Colin Cowherd?
Yes, Colin Cowherd. And he was talking about, he does a separate, I follow him on TikTok. He's actually, when he talks about politics, he's really a straightforward guy. He's like, I'm tired of all this stuff, but he's like, that Trump has surrounded himself, his friend group is now basically a bunch of convicted felons. And if you're a convicted felon, I mean, state of Missouri, for example, you're a convicted felon in Missouri. What restrictions are placed on you, and what can and can't you do in the state of Missouri if you're a convicted felon?
So in Missouri, at least, you can't run for public office. For state office, you can't vote. You can't possess a firearm. Those are the big ones, and then there are other ancillary things, like sometimes it can affect your public benefits like housing or maybe SNAP or EBT, things like that. But the big ones are you can't run for public office, you can't vote, and you can't own a firearm.
And and Sean was actually asked, we were talking about this in our text earlier this week, and he's like, well, how can he still run for president? I was like, of course, we've actually had people in jail who have run for president. It was 19. It was either 20 or 1916 or 1920. I can't remember which one it was. Or no, I'm sorry, it was either 1912 or 1916. Eugene V. Debs was the socialist candidate for president, and he was basically put into prison for violation of the it was basically a sedition act. It's alien sedition act, or I can't remember which one it was, but it was basically speaking out. You couldn't speak out against the war, anything to do with the war, and they basically put him in prison for it. And he ran for election from prison, and nobody had prevented him from doing it. And that's the one that I remembered. But there's nothing. Correct me if I'm wrong, Alex. There's nothing in our federal law that says a felon can't run for federal office. Is that sound
Correct.
right?
Correct. Yeah. Yeah. The office of President of the United States is a constitutional office, and the Constitution only has two qualifications: are you over 35 years old, and are you a natural born citizen?
And
That's it.
right. And you got to live here for at least 14 years before you become
Yeah.
president. You know,
Yeah.
it's just amazed me on what he's done and what's going on. So, Sean, what else you got there?
No, you had kind of covered some of the ones that I was going to circle back to. And now, so you had said this was a simple case, and that you were pretty sure from the jump that you thought he was going to be guilty. And I know you briefly covered the RICO charge out in Georgia. Do we know how many more outstanding cases Trump has before November? Like I mean, is this just, I know that there's a couple dominoes lined up. I just don't know how, if this is the first of many to fall, or what we're kind of looking like. Do either of you guys?
Well, I think four or five more cases, I believe.
Yeah, I mean, I know like we covered. I know he's got the two DC cases, which are the classified documents, and
I forgot about the documents case. Yeah,
and the insurrection case, and then there's the Arizona fake electors, and I'm not sure what else is left. So,
man, now since we now have one case done, in your opinion, how do you think this affects him going into election season? I mean, do you think that this hurts him negatively as far as like public opinion, or do you think this is something that is gonna actually help him, like so many are saying?
yeah, I don't know. I mean, clearly it's helped him financially. Like there were articles saying that basically he
$300
crashed
million or something like that. Yeah.
crashed his website with so many donations. As far as votes go, I have a feeling it's not going to help him that much, because I think there are probably a lot of people out there who maybe were on the fence about voting for Trump and probably couldn't bring themselves to vote for a convicted felon, no matter what the felony is. There are also a lot of people that this has really like ginned up their passion and excitement for Trump, and they're all gung ho. I think those people were probably voting for him anyways.
Yeah.
right.
So it might be a net loss, but I mean, it doesn't hurt if he's going to end up raising like an extra $500 million that he can spend on campaign ads. I mean, it may help him in the end.
Yeah.
So
Interesting. Okay. Now, V, do you know, with the court dates lining up, how many of them? Because the first debate is supposed to take place in September. Is that
actually the first debate is in just a few weeks, actually.
Oh, wow. Okay, so
they've agreed to two debates right now, is what I've heard. And the first one's coming up, and then I think the second one will be in September. But with I really do think that this is going to be such a big circus, like it was in 2020 at the 2020 election. The 2016 and 2020 elections were just shams of debates. They weren't debates; they were shouting matches, and a lot of this that's coming out. And my wife and I talked about this tonight. We always talk about what we're going to talk about on the podcast and everything. And her whole thing was, Trump his narcissism is going to get the best of him in the end on this, because this is what I hate. This is what I hate about all this publicity over these trials. It's like you said, Johnny. I mean, he's raising more money because of this, but at the same time, I mean, it's free publicity. It's free publicity, and I mean, he can't buy better campaign advertisements than that. Oh, look at the establishment. They're going after me. They're doing this. They're doing that. You know, they're so bad. They're so evil. They're so all this stuff. And to me, it really does bother me at the level of how, and I know Jonathan Guthrie, I apologize now, but I'm going to go ahead and say it's almost cultish how people, still want to go after this and just, well, he can't be, so they're going after him. I mean, and I'll just repeat this again now that Sean's on here. I mean, Alex, does this, in your opinion, as an attorney and as just as a citizen, do you see this as the legal system, the the judicial department going after? Is this them targeting Trump because he is a political foe, or do you see this as, hey, you got caught with your hand in the cookie jar, and you're gonna pay for it? I mean, we're enforcing the rule of law on you.
Yeah, it's kind of tough because I would say, like, for example, on the New York case, I mean, I think it's pretty clear that he did commit the crime. He's good for it. At the same time, the DA ran on his last election.
Yeah.
He got elected solely on the basis platform of, I'm going to prosecute Donald Trump. And so it's a little bit like that. The other pending matters, I think, might be a little bit less politically targeted. But yeah, this New York one, like I said, it's tough because I think he's good for it. He did it. But I think if there is no way that DA's office would have poured the amount of time and resources into something like this if it wasn't a former president that had committed it, which I don't love as a prosecutor. You tend to think we should treat everybody equally under the law.
Well, how do
But
you so with that right there? Let's go with that comment right there. All right, so now some of the other things that we're seeing and what is coming up is, okay, why wasn't Hillary prosecuted? And so that was asked of Donald Trump, and I only caught this through my feed on Snapchat. I listened to this guy who does, it's called Good Luck America, and this guy, he took a clip from an interview that Trump did with Newsmax, which is, it's far right. And he's like, well, why didn't you go after Hillary after the election? He's like, well, I don't think it would have been good at the time to have, put the country through that kind of stuff and blah, 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 blah. And I mean, he's saying this after the fact, and then for the fact, and the other thing I keep on seeing a lot of the memes that people are posting was the out of court settlement that Bill Clinton had made with Monica Lewinsky. It was like for $500,000 way back when. Well, why wasn't that prosecuted and everything else? Well, I think part of the reason why that wasn't prosecuted back in the day was it wasn't it was basically I guess a non-disclosure agreement, and hey, keep your mouth shut and here's your money. So, I mean, with that in mind, I mean, so and Trump has also basically said too that once he's elected, and this was Steve Bannon on his podcast, I think it was yesterday or the day before yesterday, said, November 6th is going to be a day of reckoning, and we're going to see, the Justice Department's going to go after all these crooked guys. And I mean, what my fear, and I'll ask you this, Alex, is what, if anything, could Donald Trump possibly do, or his Justice Department possibly do, against the bad people when he gets in office? I mean, if he gets in office.
I mean, he could prosecute political opponents. I mean, he could appoint an attorney general that he knows will be loyal and do whatever he says. And he could order that attorney general to appoint U.S. attorneys in all these districts that go after Democrats or whoever, people that hurt Trump. But this is kind of what I meant with the comment about the New York case. We still have a jury system here in the U.S., and I tend to think juries get it right like 99% of the time. And no matter what, even if he prosecutes these political opponents, even if the prosecutions themselves are politically motivated, he still has to convince 12 regular people
Right.
that someone actually did commit a crime, which is why I give the New York case a little bit of credit. Even if it was politically motivated, there were still 12 people that decided, yes, he committed this crime. So, I mean, he could do a lot of damage, but ultimately he's only going to get convictions on things that actually happened.
Well, and what could that do? That's the other thing too. I mean, would that be considered political suicide just by doing? I mean, of course, if he gets elected, he's not going to be able to run again. So,
Yeah.
I mean, he's just basically gonna, that's what I'm afraid of. He's just going to say, "Hey, I've got nothing to lose. Let's go to work."
Yeah, I mean, he could. I mean, it's one of those things that we all that the government kind of keeps it they kind of keep each other at arm's length. Like if the president weaponizes the Justice Department, okay, then Congress weaponizes the impeachment process. Or
Yeah, right.
I mean, it's one of those things that it's if you weaponize one branch more than the other, it's going to go throw the whole thing out of whack. Um, I think it would be a mistake to do that, honestly, because I think it would also further, we have a real problem in this country right now with people not trusting the justice system. And, if Trump goes after his political opponents, that's only going to further the problem. So I think it's best to leave those kind of decisions to the professional prosecutors, to the U.S. attorneys that actually try cases. Leave the decisions to who to prosecute to them.
And so so obviously he'll be able to appoint a new attorney general, but as far as everybody else within the DOJ, they'll still be. I mean, they'll still be these guys who. I mean, the federal judges are appointed for life, and so
Yeah.
these guys. I mean, Joe. I'm sure that Joe's appointed his fair share of judges, and Trump. We know that Trump has nominated.
Yeah.
And I think some of the judges in some of his cases are actually judges that
Yes.
he appointed.
Yes.
So it's not like he's got. I mean, that's what gives me faith in the judicial system. Still, is that there are still some guys who are not going to be a yes man for the president. They're still, the blind eye of judgment of justice is going to say, "Hey, everybody's equal under the law, and we're going to treat it that way." But Sean, what do you got?
I had another question. Have you looked into any of this Hunter Biden trial that's supposed to be starting in the next week or two?
A little bit. Yeah. I mean, I know about the facts of the case. Yeah.
Yeah. So, like in cases like his, is this something that's also kind of a like you said, kind of a simple case where it's pretty obvious that a crime was committed, and going into this, it looks like, the court denied his plea deal and now he's pleading not guilty.
Yep.
So with it being Hunter Biden, there's a very good chance that it doesn't, he's probably not going to serve jail or prison time.
Yeah.
But, is this kind of one of those other things where, because, obviously when Trump was found guilty, the number one trend on Twitter the next day was lock him up, lock him up, lock him up.
Yeah.
Now he's got to go to prison. And I'm sure that, in your opinion, with the little bit that you've kind of looked at, is this Hunter Biden case also kind of a pretty open shut case? And then, I mean, obviously we know what if it is, and if he is found guilty, we already know what the more right side of the coin is going to say in the matter afterwards.
Yeah, it seems pretty simple. I mean, basically he's charged with lying on this application for a firearm. He stated that he was not a habitual drug user, but then at the same time he wrote in his book that at the time he was heavily addicted to marijuana, and the federal government treats marijuana as an illegal narcotic, and so
a little thing called crack cocaine, which is
yes, and
also
so I mean,
yeah.
So it seems pretty simple. He's basically already admitted to the crime. But yeah, so I mean, yeah, I don't know if Hunter Biden will do any time either. But I will say it is interesting. I mean, this is Joe Biden's Justice Department prosecuting Hunter Biden. So at the very least, Joe Biden seems to be taking a hands-off approach and letting his Justice Department do their own thing.
Yeah.
Well, it was, and I know that people are gonna, do a little bit of the quote tweeting, because, the day that Trump was found guilty, the first tweet from the president was "Nobody is above the law," and so yeah. Well, we'll find out, here in the next couple of weeks, but yeah. I mean, what a time. When we've talked about it, and Alex, you've talked about it when you've been on the show, and V and I, it's almost like a rinse, wash, repeat that we have every single time that we're on here. It feels like with all the different advances that we've made in just the world as a whole, that now in 2024, we are still at a point where the best option for half the nation seems to be a convicted felon who, again, is selling printed Bibles and is a convicted felon because he paid hush money to a prostitute. And it wasn't
A porn star.
Porn star. Come on, Sean.
Yes. My
Porn star,
apologies. I forget there is a fine line between porn and prostitution when there's a camera involved. So I forget it. I forget. But seemingly between a convicted felon who could potentially be seen, even more felonies rack up on his Boy Scout badge patch, but or potentially someone that is seemingly struggling hard with dementia. Now, this might be a little bit off the Kittle, and you don't have to throw the honorable judge of Pike County under the bus, but in your career field, this is politics on one side of the coin where we're seeing these kind of things. Now, in your career field, is there this much of a hodgepodge of craziness that you see, like from the top level down, or is everything pretty seemingly normal in the different courthouses the courthouse that you find yourself in and the staff that you are surrounded with?
Yeah, everything's normal. I mean, I'm an elected official. I'm a Republican. I was elected as a Republican. Every judge that I deal with is elected, and they have to choose a political affiliation. Our circuit clerks are elected. I will say you would not. If I didn't know whether they put an R or a D next to the name on the ballot, you would never be able to tell whether they're Republican or Democrat. So I think on a local level across the country, you don't see this kind of craziness. And I would hope people get that out of. I would hope people don't basically extrapolate down. Don't see what's going on in these other places and think, oh, these kind of political persecutions are going on in Pike County, because that's definitely not the case.
But that is kind of what I've wondered, because a lot of, and I hadn't heard about this until when Trump started appointing his judges and everything, his Supreme Court justices, that there was this it was a ranking system done by this independent group as to, were these guys judicial activists, or were they more of a mind of judicial restraint where they practice and go by. And a lot of the judges, and I was quite surprised that the judges that Donald Trump appointed were of the mindset of judicial restraint. We're going to look at each case by case. Party affiliation is not going to really push us and shift us any certain way. And I mean, that is what you want, because I guess on the federal level, they're not. I know that there are laws in place that say, hey, when you become a federal judge, you have to give up your, you can't be practicing law on the side. You can't be, and you really can't, if you're a part of any kind of party affiliation, like you're you're the local representative for your political party or whatever in a you have to drop those jobs. So I think that this is one of those things that you look at the judicial system. I maybe I'm naive in believing this. I don't want to think that there is a that there's a agenda out to go after Donald Trump, but at the same time, like you said earlier, I hope that this doesn't turn into a weaponization of our judicial system, because then it I mean, what's to stop, you know, it's like, to me, it's like French Revolution 2.0. All it takes is one guy to say, "Hey, I saw such and such do this. Let's go after him and take him before a judge, and we're going to get this." I mean, I don't know. What you said about the weaponization is what scares me the most about all of this.
Yeah, it is frightening. I would say a lot of this, it comes down to um, kind of, and when I say institutions, I don't mean like government institutions. I mean like more like our social mores, our ethics as a people. And I would have faith in the American people that they just don't put up with stuff like that. Um, but a lot of that is the problem. And I know it's been talked about a lot on your show. It's the media feeding this narrative, and people are getting whipped up and they're in a frenzy about the election. And, when it benefits your side, people love political prosecutions. And when it's your guy on trial, they want to go to the courthouse and burn it to the ground. So
I I do want to play, if I can get this clip to work. If it doesn't work, we'll go back to some other discussion. But I've got this clip loaded up. I don't know if it's going to work, because Sean and I haven't done a live in a while. So, but let me try to play this clip. If it works, great, and if it doesn't work, we'll just go back to it. So let me try this real quick.
Well, Donald Trump is now a felon. His campaign chairman was a felon. So is his deputy campaign manager, his personal lawyer, his chief strategist, his national security advisor, his trade advisor, his foreign policy advisor, his campaign fixer, and his company CFO. They're all felons, judged by the company you keep. It's a cabal of convicts. If everybody in your social circle is a felon, I don't think it's rigged. I don't think the world's against you. And to get people to agree on anything, 34 counts, 0 for 34. I mean, that's a batting slump even the New York Mets could be impressed with. 0 for 34. When you're constantly trying to sell me on an America that I don't see, I'm not saying inflation's not an issue, but I get on airplanes all the time, and it's not a bunch of rich people. I don't fly private. I get on planes, there's people in normal clothes, they don't look rich to me, and the planes are all full, and the hotels are all full, and the freeways are all full. That means people are going to work. You're trying to sell me on this story and this narrative that's just not true. I have single people that live next to me, young families that live next to me. People aren't grousing. They're not miserable all day. Now, they're not talking politics, but, Trump's entire game plan is the country is in a free fall. Maybe in the Trump-centric neighborhoods it is. It's not anywhere for my sister, who lives rurally, doesn't have a lot of crime in her neighborhood. I don't. My friends don't. We live all over Los Angeles, in one of those big, scary cities that voted for liberals. Ooh, scary. But when everybody in your team, everybody in your group, your cabal is a felon, maybe the world's not against you. But stop trying to sell me on everything's rigged, the country's falling into the sea. Maybe some of you are just unhappy. Maybe you're only happy when you're unhappy. But the America that I live in is imperfect, but compared to the rest of the world, I think we're doing okay. And if you're not, is it possible? Just possible. I'm not even saying probable. Is it possible if your life has just been miserable for the last 4 years? It's not exclusively the fault of somebody in 1600 North Pennsylvania Avenue. Maybe it's not all their fault.
There you go. I mean, what are your guys' initial thoughts from that clip?
I thought it was pretty spot on. I mean, yeah, I like Colin Coward. He's pretty rational most of the time, and yeah, like I alluded to earlier, I really liked when he said, "You convinced 12 ordinary people 34 times that that he was guilty of something." I mean, I tend to trust the jury system, and even if the prosecution itself was politically motivated, 12 regular people still decided he was a felon.
By the way, our friend Jonathan Guthrie, one of our top listeners, said, "What a time to be alive." Yes, indeed, Jonathan, what a time to be alive. And also chiming in, Sean, Murdoch Murray Everett Phillips. Look at it like this: would any of you, as educators or as an attorney, be allowed to keep your jobs with a felony conviction? Thank you to our listeners for that live look in. Sean, what are your thoughts about what Colin Coward had to say?
Well, first off, I would actually love, you know how amazing it would be if our Pike County prosecuting attorney just had a fat ass felony on his record. Just like,
wait a minute,
man.
Yeah.
Like, I'm gonna bust you for selling this meth, but you didn't sell as much as I did, which got me like, I was kidding. But no,
oh man,
you know, what I actually do like about it is you're right. It's you know, we could get into, you know, the how sometimes people may or may not think that most juries are a jury of their peers. But when you're able to get the unanimous decision from 12 individuals, it speaks for itself. I mean, I think one of the things is like Alex just said, yeah, this might have been something that the prosecution itself might have been politically motivated, but the decision of these individuals was not politically motivated. I mean, the if the attorney says, "Hey, from my point of view, this is a pretty open and shut case," there's a really good chance this is going to be a pretty open and shut case. And so I just think it's good that we can have a, you know, a political figure have have his date in court, um, because I do think that this kind of thing can set a precedent. Now I know it's different because this is Trump we are talking about here, but I would like to see this opening the floodgates for other individuals that should have been tried in the past. Like, I know we joke about certain things, and we talk about it a lot, and this person should be guilty, or this person should, like, there are seemingly a lot of politicians that seem to break the law at some point in time during their, what could be 50-year career, and none of them see a courtroom ever. Um, and so whether it's because now it's we're going to have, Republicans try to get back at Democrats, and then Democrats try to get back at Republicans, and back and forth. I think that if this could help set a precedent for our political figures actually taking responsibility for their actions, I think that's a good thing. I definitely think that it's something that we should see, because again, we joke about it a lot, the Hillary thing, oh, well, Hillary never saw her date in court, but again, that's a different argument. Did she actually deserve to see her day in court? And I think that that's something we should really start to look at, because yes, obviously politicians have gone to prison in the past and have seen it, but I'm hoping that with social media the way that it is, that we actually get to enjoy seeing some of the court cases, and getting to actually be more heavily involved with seeing what our political figures are up to.
Well, one thing one
go
final
ahead.
thing that I want to bring up, and one of the biggest just escapes from justice in presidential history that I think ever occurred was Richard Nixon. Richard Nixon should have went to jail, period.
And he was given a pardon, correct?
Yeah,
Nixon was given a pardon.
Gerald Ford had given him a full pardon, whereas everybody else, pretty much from top to bottom, I forgot how many were convicted totally in Watergate, but a lot of his, I mean, a large portion of his staff, his personal attorneys, his chief of staff, Chuck Swindoll, or Chuck, I can't think of his name right. G. Gordon Liddy was another guy. All of these guys who were on his, a lot of these guys were on his staff, went to prison, spent time in jail, and Nixon walked, and he forever had that hanging over his head. And I'm with you too, Sean. There are those who, I forgot the name of the senator right now who's got these ties to Egypt and money in Egypt and everything else, and the
Menendez.
Yes, Menendez. And that guy's going to hang higher than Heyman. That guy's going to go down. I mean, he's already said he's not running for re-election. I think he stepped out of most of his positions. People need to understand that the concept of rule of law, that no one is above the law. I mean, somewhere, if we want to bring America back to a place of saying, okay, we're going to make America great again. Okay, it has to start, in my opinion, first of all, enforcing the rule of law, making sure everybody is held in check. Where if we're going to have a system of checks and balances, by God, let's do it. Let's keep a system of checks and balances in where you will answer for the crime you do. Number two, we have to get out of this whole thing of the business. Our business is chaos. Okay, and that's what these political parties are doing now. Is our business is chaos. And I'm going to do whatever I'm going to, and again, using the term that Alex used earlier, the weaponization of impeachment, the weaponization of the Justice Department, all you're doing is driving a deeper wedge. And Donald Trump knows he's doing this. He knows he's doing this. He wants us to be divided. He wants people to, let's totally go in our opposite directions, and we're going to run the country whether you like it or not. And that's, to me, is not what a democracy is based upon. It's, recognizing that the majority rules, but the minority does have rights, and they need to be respected. So, I don't know. Alex, anything else you want to contribute that we've overlooked here?
I like what you just said, and I will say if making America great again includes more funding for prosecutors so we can prosecute more people, I'm all for giving more money to your local prosecuting attorney.
Wait a minute. Yes, indeed. Oh, we want to thank you for spending time with us on this Thursday evening. Sean, it's past Sean and I's bedtime right now already, but we do want to thank you for joining us tonight, Alex.
Yeah, seriously, Alex, it's always good to have actual insight, not just two idiots babbling back and forth to one another. So we seriously do appreciate you coming on and really kind of laying the law down. And I am hoping for a sweeping victory for you for re-election.
When's the next re-election campaign start?
I'm not up until 2026.
So you've got loads of time.
I've got
locked
some time.
in.
Yeah.
Okay.
So,
Perfect.
Meth cooking. Here we come.
Well, how about to say, we should Breaking Bad it up there because we've got our Better Call Saul right here in front of us. So it's perfect. It's perfect. Well, no, again, thank you guys. Sorry that I jumped on late. I've got an infant that was giving me the business. So no, seriously, thank you guys, and to our listeners, it was great to be on live tonight. Thank you for the interaction. I was actually getting a couple of texts from another one of our former frequent guests who we should have on before too long, our financial advisor, the Donk Hank Owens. So we'll definitely have to be in touch with him. But Alex, thank you so much for coming on. To our listeners, be a friend, tell a friend. Make sure you say thank you to Alex in the comments below, and we will talk to you guys soon next week.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you for listening to the Voice of Reason podcast. Be sure to check out our other content on Facebook, YouTube,